The war had been going on for so long that nobody could remember why it started. Well, that was not exactly true. The history book said it began over some rocks in space, minerals that both sides wanted. But those rocks were gone now, sucked into a black hole more than 100 years ago. Still, the Calrix and the Vryn kept fighting. The Calrix looked like walking crystals. Their bodies were made of a material that caught light and threw it back in rainbow colors. When they were happy, they glowed soft blue. When they were angry, they turned dark red. They lived for about 90 years, which meant that nobody alive today had been there when the war started. But they all knew the stories. They knew about the billions of Calrix who had died on their home planet when the Vryn attacked it. They taught their children to hate the Vryn, and those children grew up and taught their own children the same thing. The Vryn were completely different. They looked like giant bugs with hard shells that could stop bullets. But the strangest thing about them was how they thought. The Vryn did not have individual minds like most creatures. Instead, they all shared one big mind, like a computer network made of living things. When one Vryn learned something, all Vryn knew it. When one Vryn died, the others felt it. This made them very good at fighting because they could work together perfectly without even talking. The two species had been killing each other for 473 years. They had destroyed entire planets. They had wiped out billions of lives. They had fought so many battles that both sides had run out of names for them. The war had become normal, just part of life. Calrix children played games about killing Vryn. Vryn soldiers were grown in special factories already knowing how to fight Calrix. The Galactic Council had tried to stop the war 17 times. The Council was like the United Nations, but for space. It had members from hundreds of different alien species. They would call meetings, make speeches, and try to get the Calrix and Vryn to talk to each other. Every time it failed, the two sides would not even look at each other. They would send messages through the Council, always saying the same things. The Calrix would demand the Vryn apologize for destroying their home planet. The Vryn would demand the Calrix admit they had started everything with a plague weapon. Neither side would bend. Neither side would forgive. After a while, the galaxy just accepted it. The war zones were marked on every star map with big red warnings. Trade ships went around them. Explorers avoided them. It was like a permanent storm that everyone learned to live with. Most species stopped caring. They had their own problems to worry about. Then humans showed up. Humanity had just invented faster-than-light travel a few years earlier. They were new, curious, and a bit naive about how the galaxy worked. When human diplomats arrived at the Galactic Council for the first time, they were excited to meet aliens and learn about the universe. The Council gave them a tour and explained all the important things they needed to know. Near the end, someone mentioned the Calrix-Vryn War, almost as a footnote, just something that had always been there. One of the humans in the delegation was named Jake Murphy. He was 32 years old and served as a military liaison officer on the human ship called Endeavor. Jake had short brown hair, an easy smile, and a habit of asking questions that other people thought were obvious. He had studied conflict resolution at the Naval Academy and had helped stop a riot on Mars Colony a few years back. That riot had almost turned into a civil war, but Jake had managed to get both sides talking before things got too bad. When Jake heard about the Calrix-Vryn War, something bothered him. During a break in the meetings, he approached one of the council representatives, an alien that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. Jake asked a simple question that seemed so basic that the alien was surprised nobody had asked it before. Have the Calrix and Vryn ever actually sat down in the same room and talked to each other? The alien representative did not know the answer. It had to check the historical records, which took a few minutes. When the answer came back, it was shocking. In 473 years of war, the Calrix and Vryn had never met face-to-face. They had sent messages. They had communicated through council mediators. They had shouted at each other over video calls. But they had never been in the same physical space, just sitting and talking like normal people. Jake felt a strange feeling in his gut, the same feeling he had gotten during the Mars riots. He had seen this pattern before. People who hated each other often did so from a distance. They built up ideas in their heads about who their enemies were. They believed stories and rumors. They forgot that their enemies were real living things with hopes and fears. Sometimes all it took to start fixing things was to put people in the same room and make them see each other as actual beings instead of monsters. Of course, this was different. This was not a labor dispute on Mars. This was a war between alien species that had lasted longer than most human nations had existed. But Jake could not shake the feeling that the basic problem was the same. These two sides had been fighting for so long that they had forgotten how to do anything else. Jake spent the next few days thinking about it. He talked to other human diplomats. He read everything he could find about the Calrics and Vryn. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that something was very wrong with how this war had been handled. Everyone kept trying to negotiate terms for peace, dividing territory, setting up trade agreements, planning how things would work after the war. But nobody had asked the simple question that mattered most. Why were they still fighting? What was the point? The original reason for the war was gone. The nebula they had been fighting over did not exist anymore, so what were they fighting for now? Jake suspected that if someone just asked that question directly and made both sides think about it, something might change. He decided to write up a proposal for the Galactic Council. It was a crazy idea, probably impossible and definitely dangerous. But Jake had learned something during his years in the military. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to try the one thing that nobody else had tried, because it seemed too simple or too stupid. Jake wanted to get the Calrics and Vryn in the same room and just let them talk. Getting approval for his plan took Jake 3 weeks of meetings and arguments. Most of the Galactic Council members thought he was wasting everyone's time. They had tried to make peace 17 times before. What made this human think he could do better? Some council members were polite about it. Others told him directly that he was being foolish and did not understand how serious this war was. But one council member supported him. The jellyfish alien who had first checked the records seemed interested in Jake's idea. Its name was impossible for humans to pronounce, so everyone just called it Coordinator Vel. Vel told the council that sometimes fresh eyes saw things that experienced ones missed. After many debates and votes, the council agreed to let Jake try. But they made it clear that if anything went wrong, it would be his fault alone. Now came the hard part. Jake had to convince two species who hated each other to actually show up for a meeting. He could not just send official messages through normal channels. Those would be ignored or rejected immediately. He needed to find people on both sides who might be willing to take a chance. Jake started with the Calrics. He spent days going through intelligence reports and communication intercepts, looking for anyone who seemed less hardline than the others. He found a name that kept appearing in reports. Commander Zethara was a mid-level officer in the Calrics fleet. She had a reputation for being practical and efficient. Unlike some Calrics commanders who sought glory in battle, Zethara seemed focused on keeping her soldiers alive and completing missions with minimum casualties. Jake managed to get a private communication channel to her through some backroom deals with council staff. When Zethara's face appeared on his screen, her crystalline features were hard to read. Her body was glowing a cautious yellow color, which Jake's translator said meant she was suspicious. "Human Jake Murphy," she said in a voice like wind chimes. "I have heard of your species. You are new to the galaxy. Why do you contact me?" Jake decided to be direct. "Because I want to end the war between your people and the Vryn, and I think you might want the same thing." Zethara's color shifted to red. "End the war? The only way to end it is to destroy the Vryn completely. They murdered billions of my people. They destroyed our homeworld. There can be no peace with them. Then why are you still here?" Jake asked. "You are a smart commander. You know the war is not going well for anyone. Both sides are losing. Both sides are dying. If you really wanted to destroy the Vryn, would you not need a different strategy?" The red color faded slightly. Zethara was quiet for a moment. "What are you proposing, human?" "A meeting. Face to face. You and some Vryn leaders in the same room. No weapons, no fighting. Just talking. We have tried talking before. It never works, no," Jake said. "You have sent messages through middlemen. You have never actually sat down together. When was the last time a Calrix looked a Vryn in the eye and just talked?" Zethara's colors flickered through several shades. "Never," she finally admitted. "It has never happened. But I do not see how it would help. We have nothing to say to them." "Maybe," Jake said. "But what if you do? What if there is something that has been missed all these years because nobody ever just talked directly? You are Calrix. You value honor, right? Is there not honor in facing your enemy directly? In speaking your truth to their face instead of hiding behind distance and weapons?" That argument seemed to reach her. The Calrics were very proud of their concept of honor. They wrote poems about it. They taught it to their children. They judged each other by it. The idea that facing the Vryn directly might be more honorable than continuing to fight from afar made her pause. "I will take your proposal to my superiors," Zethara said, "but I promise nothing." "That is all I ask," Jake replied. 2 weeks later, Zethara contacted him again. Her color was a bright, determined blue. "The High Command has agreed. We will send representatives to your meeting. But only if the Vryn agree as well, and we want security guarantees." Jake felt his heart race with excitement, but he kept his voice calm. "Understood. Thank you, Commander." The Vryn were even harder to convince. They did not have individual leaders the way the Calrics did. Decisions were made by the whole collective mind, which could take days or even weeks. Jake sent his proposal through official Galactic Council channels and waited. 5 days passed with no response. Jake was starting to worry that the Vryn would simply ignore him. But then a message came through. A Vryn representative wanted to speak with him. The Vryn who appeared on his screen looked like a large insect with multiple arms and eyes. Its shell was dark green and very shiny. It introduced itself as Node Coordinator XAL-9, which meant it was one of the connection points in the Vryn network, helping coordinate communication between different parts of their species. "Human Jake Murphy," XAL-9 said in a flat voice that showed no emotion. "The collective has reviewed your proposal. We do not understand its purpose. We have attempted peace negotiations many times. They always fail." Jake had expected this. He had prepared a different argument for the Vryn. "I am not proposing peace negotiations. I am proposing an intelligence-gathering opportunity." XAL-9's head tilted slightly. "Explain." "You have been fighting the Calrics for centuries, but have you ever observed their leaders up close in a non-combat situation? This meeting would let you study how they think, how they make decisions, how they react under pressure. That information could be valuable, whether you end up making peace or continuing the war." This approach worked. The Vryn were very logical. They valued information and efficiency. The idea of gaining intelligence about their enemy made sense to them in a way that emotional appeals about peace would not. XAL-9 was silent for almost a minute, which Jake guessed meant the collective was discussing his proposal internally. Finally, it spoke again. "The collective finds merit in this proposal. We will send representatives, but we require absolute security guarantees from the Galactic Council. If this is a Calric's trap, there will be consequences." "It is not a trap," Jake promised. "The Council will ensure everyone's safety. Both sides will come unarmed, and there will be neutral security forces present." "Acceptable," XAL-9 said, and the communication ended. Jake sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. He had done it. Both sides had agreed to meet. Now he just had to make sure the actual meeting did not turn into a disaster. He contacted Coordinator Vel and started planning the logistics. They chose a neutral space station called Harmony Station, which was located in empty space between Calrics and Vryn territory. The Galactic Council would provide security. Both sides could bring 5 representatives each, all unarmed. The meeting would take place in a specially prepared room that could adjust its environment to suit both species. Jake spent the next 2 weeks preparing himself. He read everything he could about both cultures. He studied the history of the war, learning about every major battle and atrocity. He reviewed all 17 previous peace attempts, looking for patterns and mistakes. What he noticed was that every previous attempt had focused on practical details like territory and reparations. Nobody had ever addressed the emotional core of the conflict. Nobody had asked why they were still fighting after the original cause was gone. On the morning of the meeting, Jake woke up early on Harmony Station. He was nervous but also excited. He knew this might not work. The two sides might just yell at each other and leave. But at least they would be in the same room, actually talking. That was more than had happened in 473 years. The Calrics arrived first. Commander Zethara led the group through the docking bay of Harmony Station. 4 other Calrics officers walked behind her in perfect formation. Their crystalline bodies reflected the station lights, creating moving patterns of color on the walls. They moved like soldiers, disciplined and alert, their hands never far from where their weapons would normally be. But they had agreed to come unarmed, and Jake could see they were uncomfortable without their usual gear. Jake met them at the entrance to the meeting room. Up close, the Calrics were beautiful in a strange way. Zethara's body was mostly clear crystal with hints of blue running through it. Her face was smooth and hard, with angular features that reminded Jake of carved ice sculptures. Her eyes were multifaceted like a diamond, catching light from every angle. "Commander Zethara," Jake said, offering a small bow that he had learned was a Calric's gesture of respect. "Thank you for coming. I know this was not easy." Zethara's body shifted to a sharp yellow color. Her voice was cold. "We are here because you spoke of honor. Human Jake Murphy. Do not make us regret this decision with empty words and false promises. We have heard enough of those." "I understand," Jake said. "I am not here to make promises. I am just here to help you talk. What happens after that is up to you and the Vryn." He led them into the meeting room. It was circular with a round table in the center. The Galactic Council had designed it so nobody sat at the head of the table. Everyone would be equal. The room had special air systems that could create different environments for different species. One half of the room was cooler and drier for the Calrics. The other half would be warmer and more humid for the Vryn. The Calrics took their seats on the cool side of the room. They sat stiffly, their colors constantly shifting between yellow and red. Jake could tell they were nervous and angry. He hoped they would not walk out before the Vryn even arrived. 10 minutes later, the Vryn came. Their delegation moved in perfect synchronization, all 5 of them walking in step as if they were parts of one machine. They were large, each one about 7 feet tall with thick shells covering their bodies. They had multiple arms and legs, and their heads were dominated by large compound eyes that seemed to look in every direction at once. Node Coordinator Zal-9 was in the front. Jake had learned to identify it by a small marking on its shell. The Vryn did not really care about individual identity the way other species did, but they used markings to help other species tell them apart. "Node Coordinator Zal-9, Jake said. "Welcome. Please take your seats." The Vryn did not respond to the greeting. They simply moved to the other side of the table and sat down in perfect unison. The moment they were seated, their eyes all locked onto the Calrics. The Calrics stared back. The tension in the room became thick and heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on everything. Jake sat down between the 2 groups, but slightly back from the table. He wanted to be present but not in the way. He took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "I know this is difficult. You have been enemies for longer than my entire species has had space travel. I am not going to pretend that I can solve that in one meeting, but I think we can start something here. So I am going to ask you one simple question, and I want you to answer honestly." He looked at Zethara, then at Zal-9. "Why are you still fighting this war?" The room was silent for a long moment. Jake could see Zethara's colors shifting rapidly, cycling through several shades. The Vryn remained perfectly still, but Jake knew they were communicating with each other through their shared mind, discussing how to respond. Finally, Zethara spoke. Her voice was hard and sharp. "We fight because the Vryn took everything from us. They destroyed Kalmoth Prime, our home world. 3 billion Calrics died in that attack. Our history, our culture, our families all turned to ash in one day. How can we forget that? How can we forgive that?" Jake nodded slowly. Before he could respond, Zal-9 spoke in its flat, emotionless voice. "Kalmoth Prime was destroyed in retaliation. The Calrics released a biological weapon on Vryn Hive World 7. 12 billion Vryn died. Their minds were torn from the collective. We felt every death. The network still carries the scars. We will never be whole again." Zethara's body flashed bright red. "That is a lie. The plague was an accident. A mining operation released something we did not know was there. We sent warnings. We offered to help. Your people refused and blamed us instead." "More Calrics lies," another Vryn unit said. "Your military knew about the pathogen. Analysis of communications shows deliberate negligence. You saw an opportunity to harm the collective and you took it." "Not true," a different Calrics officer interrupted. His colors were jagged and angry. "High Command ordered immediate containment. We sent medical ships to help. You shot them down. You killed our doctors and then claimed we were attacking you." "The ships contained weapons," Zal-9 responded. "Our sensors detected military-grade explosives hidden among the medical supplies. It was clearly an attack disguised as aid." Jake listened without interrupting. This was what he had expected. Both sides had their version of history. Both sides believed they were the victims and the other side were the monsters. The argument went back and forth, accusations flying across the table. The Calric spoke of Vryn attacks on colony ships and prisoner camps where Calrics were dissected alive for study. The Vryn countered with stories of Calric's weapons designed specifically to destroy Vryn neural connections and battle stations that fired on civilian ships. Jake noticed something important. Neither side was lying. They were both telling the truth as they understood it. The Calrics really believed the plague had been an accident. The Vryn really believed their sensors had detected weapons in those medical ships. Both sides had suffered real atrocities and real losses. The problem was that each atrocity had been a response to a previous atrocity, going back and back until the original cause was buried under centuries of pain. After about 15 minutes of this, Jake held up his hand. "Can I ask something else?" He did not wait for permission. "How many of you were actually alive when this war started?" The room went quiet again. Zethara's color shifted to a dim blue. "None of us," she said quietly. "The war began 473 years ago. The Calrics lived for about 90 years. My great-great-great-grandmother was young when it started. I only know the stories. The collective remembers," Zal 9 said. "The Vryn mind is continuous. We do not die as individuals. The memories of those who fell are preserved in the network. But you personally," Jake pressed, "your individual node. You were not there, right?" There was a pause. "This unit came online 43 years ago," Zal 9 admitted. Jake leaned forward. "So none of you in this room experienced the events that started this war. You inherited it. Your parents and grandparents passed it down to you. And they got it from their parents. And now your children are learning to hate each other too, just like you did." He looked around the table. "Can I ask what you are fighting for right now? Not what happened centuries ago, but today, right now, what is the point of this war?" A younger Calrics officer spoke up, her colors uncertain and dim. "We fight to honor those who died, to give their sacrifice meaning. If we stop fighting, it means they died for nothing. We fight because stopping would dishonor the collective memory," Zal 9 added. "Those who were lost deserve justice. Justice or revenge?" Jake asked gently. "Because those are different things." Zethara's pattern shifted to a color Jake had not seen before, something between blue and purple. Her voice was softer now. "In our language, there is only one word for both. We do not separate them." "The Vryn language is the same," Zal 9 said. "Justice and revenge are the same concept. To avenge is to achieve justice." Jake stood up and walked to the large window that showed the stars outside. "Let me tell you about something that happened on Earth, my home world. About 300 years ago, two of our nations went to war over some islands. The war lasted decades. Millions of people died. Eventually they made peace, but the hatred continued. Each side taught their children to hate the other side. They spent 100 years preparing to fight again." He turned back to face them. Then one day a huge earthquake hit one of those nations. Thousands of people died. Cities fell down. Millions of people had no homes, no food, no clean water. And the other nation, their old enemy, sent help. Ships full of food and medicine. Rescue workers, doctors, they did not have to do it. Nobody made them. They just saw people suffering and decided to help, even though those people were supposed to be their enemies. Jake walked back to the table. That is when the hatred started to end, because people realized that the children who were suffering had never done anything wrong. Those children had not started the war. They had just been born into it. "A nice story," Zethara said, but her tone was less harsh now. "But we are not human." "No, you are not," Jake agreed. "But you are not that different either. You both feel pain. You both lose people you care about. You both want the dying to stop." He sat down again. "So let me ask again. What are you fighting for right now? Not what happened in the past, but what do you hope to achieve?" Zal 9 spoke slowly. "Current projections show that if the war continues at this rate, both species will face population." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. Jake watched as the reality of what Zal 9 had said sank in. Both species knew they were losing the war. Both sides had seen the projections and the casualty reports, but hearing it stated so plainly in front of their enemies made it real in a different way. Zethara's colors had gone very dim, almost gray. "We know this," she said quietly. "Our strategists have shown us the same numbers. But to stop fighting, to surrender, that is unthinkable. It goes against everything we are." "Who said anything about surrender?" Jake asked. He pulled out a small device and projected a holographic star map above the table. "Look at this." These are the systems you are fighting over right now. The map showed several star systems highlighted in red. 3 of them were marked as Calrix claimed but Vryn occupied. 2 were marked as Vryn claimed but Calrix occupied. Jake zoomed in on each one, showing data about their resources and strategic value. I have studied these systems, Jake continued. I have read the military reports and economic analyses. None of these systems are particularly valuable. The resources are average at best. The strategic locations are not that important. You are fighting over them because they are contested, not because you actually need them. He looked at both delegations. What if you both just left? Pulled your forces back to your main territories, created a buffer zone. Nobody gets the contested systems, but nobody has to surrender them either. You just stop fighting over them. A Calrix officer shook his head. The Vryn would use the time to rebuild their forces and attack our core worlds. The Calrix would fortify their positions and prepare for invasion, a Vryn unit countered. Maybe, Jake admitted. Or maybe you would both use the time to rebuild your civilizations instead of your war machines. Maybe your people would remember what peace feels like. He closed the star map. But here is the thing. I cannot make you stop fighting. The Galactic Council cannot make you stop. You have to choose it, both of you together. Zethara turned to her fellow officers. Her body started changing colors rapidly, which Jake had learned meant the Calrix were having a silent conversation. Their colors flashed and pulsed, communicating in a way that human translators could not follow. The Vryn remained perfectly still, but Jake knew they were doing the same thing through their mental network. After what felt like forever, Zethara turned back to the table. What you propose could work in theory, but it requires trust. How can we trust the Vryn? They have broken agreements before. They have used ceasefires to reposition their forces and attack when we lowered our guard. Before Jake could respond, Zal 9 spoke. The collective has the same concern. Calrix honor is praised, but Calrix deception is also well documented. How can we trust that this is not a trap? Jake had been expecting this. You are right. You cannot trust each other, not completely, so do not try. Start small instead. Pull back your forces from one contested system, both of you at the same time. Make it the least important one, the one neither of you really cares about. Watch each other. Verify that both sides follow through. If that works, then you take another step. Then another. Build trust slowly. Zal 9 tilted its head. Building trust incrementally. The collective finds this approach logical. But what happens if one side violates the agreement? Another Calrix officer asked. What if the Vryn pretend to withdraw but leave hidden forces behind? Then you go back to war, Jake said bluntly. You are at war right now. Taking a chance on peace does not cost you anything you are not already risking every single day. But if it works, if you can build even a small amount of trust, then both your civilizations survive. Your people get to live. Your children do not have to grow up learning how to kill. The Vryn delegation went still again, that particular stillness that meant intense internal discussion. After a minute, Zal 9 spoke. The collective has reached consensus. We are willing to attempt this incremental withdrawal approach, but we require verification. A neutral party must monitor compliance. The Galactic Council can do that, Jake offered. No, Zethara said firmly. Her colors flashed red for a moment. The Council has failed us 17 times before. They make promises and then do nothing when agreements are broken. We need someone with actual authority and the will to act. Her colors shifted to a determined blue. We want humanity to monitor the withdrawal. Your species is new. You have no history with this war. You have nothing to gain from either side winning. And you, Jake Murphy, have shown more understanding in a few hours than the Council has in centuries. Jake felt his stomach drop. This was not what he had expected. He was just one person, a mid-level officer. He did not have the authority to commit humanity to something this big. I cannot make that decision alone. I would need approval from my superiors. Then get approval, Zal 9 said. This is the Vryn condition. We will accept human monitoring, or we will accept no monitoring at all. Without neutral verification, we cannot proceed. Zethara's colors matched the agreement. The Calrix agree. We trust human neutrality. We do not trust the Council. Will you help us, Jake Murphy? Or will you let this opportunity die? Jake looked at both delegations. He saw hope in their faces, or whatever passed for hope in such alien features. These were soldiers and leaders who had spent their entire lives fighting. They had grown up knowing nothing but war, and now they were asking him, a human they barely knew, to help them find a way out. "Give me 1 hour," Jake said. "I need to contact my government. I will do everything I can to make this happen." Jake left the meeting room and practically ran to the communications center. His hands were shaking as he opened a secure channel to the human delegation's main ship. Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on the screen. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Murphy," she said, "I was expecting your report. How did the meeting go?" "It went better than expected, Admiral," Jake said quickly. "Both sides are willing to try a ceasefire. But there is a complication. They want humanity to monitor the withdrawal and verify compliance." Admiral Hayes raised an eyebrow. "They want us to do what?" "Murphy, we have been in space for barely 10 years. We do not have the experience or resources for something like that." "That is exactly why they want us, Admiral. We have no stake in their war. No old grudges. We are neutral by default." "We are also vulnerable," Hayes countered. "If either side decides to violate the agreement and blame us, we become a target. Humanity does not have the military strength to defend against the Calrics or Vryn, let alone both." "They will not do that," Jake insisted. "I know it sounds crazy, but I really think they want peace. They are just exhausted. Both sides. They need someone to help them stop without losing face." Hayes drummed her fingers on her desk. Jake knew that gesture meant she was thinking hard about something. "What exactly would we be committing to?" "Monitoring troop withdrawals from contested systems. Verifying that both sides follow through on their promises. We would not be enforcing anything, just observing and reporting. The Galactic Council can provide the actual monitoring equipment and personnel. We just need to be the ones who certify the reports. And if one side cheats, then we report it to both sides and to the Council. After that, it is up to them. We are not police. We are just witnesses." Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Jake held his breath. "You got them to agree to stop fighting in just a few hours?" "Yes, ma'am. The Galactic Council has been trying for centuries. The Council tried to negotiate complex treaties," Jake explained. "I just asked them why they were still fighting. Turns out nobody had bothered to ask that question in a very long time." Admiral Hayes smiled slightly. "You are either brilliant or incredibly lucky, Murphy." "Probably both," she sighed. "All right. I will take this to Earth and get authorization. But Murphy, if this goes wrong, it is your career on the line." "Understood?" "Yes, Admiral. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. Just get back in there and keep them talking until I have an answer." The communication ended. Jake returned to the meeting room where both delegations were waiting in tense silence. He sat down and smiled. "My government is considering the request. They will give us an answer soon. In the meantime, why do we not start planning the details of the withdrawal? That way we will be ready to implement it as soon as approval comes through." For the next 40 minutes, they discussed logistics. Which system should be evacuated first? How long should the withdrawal take? What monitoring equipment would be needed? The conversation was sometimes tense, with both sides suspicious of each other's motives, but they kept talking. That was the important part. They were working together, actually cooperating toward a common goal. Jake's communicator buzzed just as the discussion was getting heated about withdrawal timelines. It was Admiral Hayes. He excused himself from the table and stepped into the hallway to take the call. "Murphy," Hayes said, and Jake could hear satisfaction in her voice. "Earth has agreed. We will monitor the ceasefire, but you are going to be in charge of the operation. Congratulations, you just got yourself a promotion and a huge responsibility." Jake felt relief and terror at the same time. "Thank you, Admiral. I will not let you down. See that you do not." Hayes out. Jake walked back into the meeting room. All eyes turned to him, Calrics and Vryn both waiting for his answer. He sat down and smiled. "Humanity has agreed. We will monitor your ceasefire and verify that both sides comply with the withdrawal schedule." The change in the room was immediate. Zathara's crystalline body shifted to a bright gold color, which Jake had learned meant hope or joy. The Vryn delegation did not show emotion the same way, but Jake noticed their rigid posture relaxed slightly. "Then we can proceed," Zathara said. "The Calrics propose we begin with the Sigma Draconis system. It is contested, but neither side considers it critical to our war effort." "Sigma Draconis is acceptable to the collective," Zal 9 confirmed. "We propose a withdrawal period of 10 standard days. All military vessels and installations must be removed. Human monitors will verify at each stage. We will need access to your military communication channels to coordinate, Jake said. And we will need permission to place observation posts at the system boundaries so we can track ship movements. Both sides agreed. For the next 2 hours, they worked out the details. It was difficult work. Both sides were suspicious and kept trying to add conditions that would give them an advantage. Jake had to mediate constantly, pointing out when demands were unreasonable or when one side was being too rigid, but they kept working. That was the key thing. They stayed in the room. They kept talking. Even when voices got loud and colors flashed angry red, they did not walk out. Somewhere during those 2 hours, something shifted. The Calrics and Vryn were not friends. They probably never would be. But they were no longer just enemies. They were two groups trying to solve a problem together. Finally, they had a framework. Both sides would withdraw all military forces from Sigma Draconis over 10 days. Human observers would monitor the withdrawal in real time. If both sides completed the withdrawal successfully, they would move on to the next contested system. If either side violated the agreement, the monitoring would stop, and they could go back to war if they wanted. I have one more suggestion, Jake said. I think you should announce this publicly. Both of you together. Let your people know that you are trying for peace. The collective agrees, Zal9 said immediately. Transparency will help maintain consensus across the network. Zathara was less certain. Her colors flickered between blue and yellow. The Calric's military will not respond well to what they may see as weakness. There will be resistance. Then do not frame it as weakness, Jake suggested. Frame it as strength. You are strong enough to try for peace. You are brave enough to take a risk. And if it fails, you can always return to war. But at least you will have tried. That takes more courage than just continuing to fight. Zathara's colors slowly shifted to that determined blue again. Very well. We will make a joint announcement. But it must be clear that this is a trial. We are not surrendering. We are testing whether coexistence is possible. Agreed, Zal9 said. 2 hours later, Jake stood in a broadcast room watching as history was made. Zathara and Zal9 appeared together on a transmission that would reach both Calrix and Vryn space. It was the first time in 473 years that leaders from both species had appeared together for anything other than combat. Zathara spoke first. Her voice was clear and strong, her crystalline body glowing a steady blue. People of the Calric sovereignty. For 473 years we have been at war with the Vryn collective. This war has taken everything from us. Our worlds, our families, our future. Today we choose to try something different. Not surrender, but survival. We announce a trial ceasefire in the Sigma Draconis system. This will be monitored by the human species, who have no interest in our conflict. This is not weakness. This is the courage to choose a new path. Then Zal9 spoke, its voice carrying the weight of billions of connected minds. Units of the Vryn collective. We have fought the Calrics for longer than most species exist. We have honored our dead with continued resistance, but we honor them more by ensuring the collective survives. We agree to a trial ceasefire. This does not erase the past, but it offers the possibility of a future. The collective will monitor results and adjust strategy accordingly. The broadcast ended. Jake let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. It was done. They had actually done it. After centuries of war, the Calrics and Vryn had agreed to try peace, even if just for a little while. Over the next 10 days, Jake barely slept. He coordinated with human observation teams and Galactic Council technical staff. They set up monitoring stations around Sigma Draconis. They tracked every ship movement, verified every withdrawal, and documented everything. It was not smooth. There were problems. The Calrics claimed the Vryn were moving too slowly, deliberately stalling. The Vryn said Calric ships were getting too close to Vryn forces during the withdrawal, possibly gathering intelligence. Jake had to mediate each dispute, sometimes working 20 hours straight to keep both sides talking and moving forward. On the third day, a Calric's destroyer got into weapons range of a Vryn hive ship. For 2 tense hours, it looked like the whole ceasefire might collapse into renewed combat. Jake got both commanders on a call and talked them down. The Calric's captain claimed it was a navigation error. The Vryn did not believe him. Jake suggested that the Calric ship withdraw immediately and submit its navigation logs for review. Both sides agreed and the crisis passed. On the 7th day, a group of Vryn units refused to leave a mining station, claiming it was civilian infrastructure, not military. The Calric said the station had military sensors and should be evacuated. Again, Jake mediated. He brought in neutral engineers to inspect the station. It did have military equipment, but it was also clearly being used for mining. Jake proposed that the military equipment be removed, but the mining operation could continue with civilian Vryn workers. Both sides accepted the compromise. On the 10th day, the last military vessel left Sigma Draconis. Jake certified the withdrawal as complete. The system was empty, a neutral buffer zone between two former enemies. He sent his report to both Calric's High Command and the Vryn Collective Consensus. 3 days later, both sides announced they were ready to negotiate the withdrawal from the next contested system. Then another. The process repeated, system by system. Each withdrawal had problems. Each one tested the fragile trust that was building. But they kept going. Within 2 months, all 5 contested systems had been evacuated. The shooting had stopped. For the first time in 473 years, the Calrics and Vryn were not actively trying to kill each other. It was not real peace. Not yet. Both sides still had their weapons. Both sides still told their children about the terrible things the other side had done. The hatred was still there, buried deep. It would take generations to heal those wounds completely, if they ever healed at all. But the dying had stopped. And that was something. That was everything, really. Jake received messages from both Zethara and Zal9. The Calric's commander's message was formal but warm. She thanked him for his wisdom and courage. She said that the Calric's people were cautiously hopeful for the first time in living memory. The Vryn message was more analytical, noting that the ceasefire had exceeded probability projections and that the collective was adjusting its long-term strategic planning to account for possible peaceful coexistence. Earth was thrilled. Humanity had been in galactic politics for less than a year, and already they had helped end one of the longest wars in known history. The Galactic Council formally recognized humanity as a mediator species. Other civilizations started asking for human help with their own conflicts. Jake got promoted to commander. More importantly, he got personal satisfaction from knowing he had made a real difference. He had not ended the war through clever tactics or superior firepower. He had done it by asking simple questions that nobody else had thought to ask, by getting people to sit in the same room and actually talk to each other, by helping them see past centuries of hatred to recognize that they both wanted the same thing, which was for the suffering to end. As Jake prepared to return to Earth, he took one last look at the star map showing Calric's and Vryn space. The contested zones were now marked in gray neutral zones where neither side claimed control. It was a small change on a galactic scale, but it represented something much bigger. It proved that even the longest wars could end, not with victory or defeat, but with the choice to simply stop fighting. 6 months after the ceasefire began, Jake returned to Harmony Station. He'd been invited by both the Calrics and the Vryn for what they called a review meeting. The purpose was to evaluate how the peace was holding and discuss next steps. Jake was nervous. 6 months was not very long. Centuries of hatred could not disappear so quickly. He worried that the ceasefire was just a temporary pause before the fighting started again. When he arrived at the station, he was surprised by what he found. The meeting room had been expanded. Instead of just 5 representatives from each side, there were now 20 Calrics and 20 Vryn present. They were not just military officers anymore. There were scientists, diplomats, and even what Jake guessed were civilian leaders. Commander Zethara greeted him warmly. Her crystalline body glowed a soft blue. "Jake Murphy, welcome back. Much has changed since you left." Node Coordinator XL9 approached as well. "The collective is pleased by your return. Your presence has been valuable to maintaining the ceasefire." Jake shook his head. "I did not maintain it. You did, both of you. I just helped you get started." "Perhaps," Zethara said. "But sometimes the beginning is the hardest part." The meeting began. Jake expected them to discuss military matters, withdrawal schedules, and monitoring reports. Instead, the conversation took a different turn. A Calric scientist stood up and addressed the room. "We have been studying the data from the neutral zones," the scientist said. "Something unexpected has happened. Without military traffic, the star systems are recovering. Ecosystems that were damaged by the war are healing. We have detected new life signs on several planets that we thought were completely dead." A Vryn scientist responded. The collective has observed the same phenomenon. Additionally, we have detected that some of the abandoned military installations contain technology that could be useful for civilian purposes. We propose a joint scientific mission to study these installations and determine their peaceful applications. Jake sat forward in his seat. You want to work together? On a joint mission? The logical benefits are clear, Zal-9 said. Calrics have advanced shield technology. Vryn have superior sensor networks. Combined, we could achieve scientific results that neither species could accomplish alone. Zethara's colors flickered uncertainly. The High Command is cautious, but they have not rejected the idea. If the humans would continue to monitor and mediate, we might be willing to attempt a small collaboration. Over the next 3 hours, they discussed possibilities. It was strange to watch. 6 months ago, these species would not even sit in the same room. Now they were talking about working together. The conversation was not always smooth. There were still moments of suspicion and old accusations. But there was also something new, which was curiosity about each other. A young Calrics officer asked a question that surprised everyone. How does the Vryn collective mind actually work? I have always wondered but never thought to ask. Zal-9 tilted its head. A valid question. The collective functions through quantum entanglement of neural structures. Each Vryn unit maintains individual processing capability, but shares data instantaneously across the network. It is both singular and plural simultaneously. That must be efficient for coordination, another Calric said. But do you ever feel alone? If you are always connected, do you have privacy? Privacy is not a concept the collective requires, Zal-9 responded. But the question suggests concern for individual welfare. This is unexpected from Calrics. Zethara's colors shifted. Perhaps we are not what you expected, just as you are not what we expected. Jake watched this exchange with growing hope. They were asking about each other. Really asking, with genuine curiosity, not just trying to find weaknesses. It was such a simple thing, but it mattered. Understanding someone was the first step to not hating them. A Vryn unit asked its own question. Calric's communication through color patterns is fascinating. How precise is it? Can complex technical data be transmitted this way? Not complex data, Zethara admitted. Colors convey emotion and simple concepts. For technical information, we use spoken language like most species, but the colors add depth to communication. They show what we feel about what we are saying. Interesting, the Vryn unit said. The collective has difficulty understanding emotion. We process it as data rather than experiencing it. Perhaps Calric's color patterns could help us comprehend emotional contexts better. The meeting continued for hours. They talked about science, culture, and even art. It turned out that both species had rich artistic traditions. The Calrics created sculptures from crystal that caught light in beautiful ways. The Vryn composed algorithmic patterns that their collective mind experienced as something like music. Nobody had ever thought to share these things before because they were too busy fighting. Toward the end of the meeting, a civilian Calrics representative stood up. She was older, her crystal body showing the wear of many years. I lost my son in the war, she said quietly. He died defending Kalshara Station 20 years ago. For 20 years I hated the Vryn. I wanted revenge. I wanted every one of them to suffer like I suffered. The room went silent. Jake held his breath. This could go very badly, the Calrics woman continued. But these past 6 months I have been thinking. My son died fighting for what he thought was right. He believed he was protecting his people. I am sure Vryn soldiers believed the same thing. They thought they were protecting their collective. Were they wrong? Was my son wrong? Or were both of them just doing what they thought they had to do in a war neither of them started? She looked directly at Zal-9. I do not forgive the Vryn for my son's death. I probably never will. But I do not want other mothers to lose their sons. If this peace continues, if our species learn to coexist, then maybe his death had meaning. Maybe he was the last generation that had to die. That is not forgiveness, but it is acceptance. Zal-9 was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice had a quality Jake had never heard before. The collective understands loss differently than individuals, but we understand permanence. Vryn who are severed from the network are gone forever. We have lost billions to this war. The collective carries the absence like empty spaces in our consciousness. We also want those spaces to be the last. We want no new absences, another Vryn unit added. The collective proposes a memorial, a shared monument in one of the neutral zones, to honor both Calrix and Vryn who died in the war. Not to celebrate the war, but to remember the cost so that future generations do not forget why peace matters. Zethara's body glowed bright gold. The Calrix accept this proposal. A shared memorial would be appropriate. It would acknowledge our shared loss. Jake felt tears in his eyes. He had not expected this. He had hoped the ceasefire would hold, that both sides would stop killing each other. But this was more. They were not just stopping the war. They were beginning to heal. Over the next year, the cooperation between Calrix and Vryn expanded slowly. They started with small joint projects, a scientific survey here, a trade agreement there. Each success built more trust. Each project taught them more about each other. The memorial was completed in the Sigma Draconis system, the first place where the shooting had stopped. It was a massive structure visible from space, built from both Calrix crystal and Vryn organic materials. It listed the names of the dead from both species, billions of them, covering every surface. Visiting the memorial became a pilgrimage for both Calrix and Vryn. They came to remember and maybe to begin to forgive. There were setbacks. Some Calrix military leaders tried to restart the war, calling the peace a betrayal of those who had died. Some Vryn units rejected the consensus and attacked Calrix ships. But each time, the majority on both sides chose peace. They arrested their own extremists. They recommitted to the ceasefire. The peace held because enough people on both sides wanted it to hold. Jake continued to serve as a mediator, though his role became less critical as time passed. The Calrix and Vryn learned to talk to each other without him. They still had disputes and misunderstandings, but they had learned to work through them. They did not need a human to tell them how to do it anymore. 5 years after the ceasefire began, the Galactic Council formally recognized the end of the Calrix-Vryn War. It was over. Not because one side won, but because both sides chose to stop. The treaty they signed was complex, covering trade, borders, and cooperation on dozens of issues. But the heart of it was simple. They agreed to never go to war with each other again. They agreed to settle disputes through negotiation. They agreed to remember the past but not be trapped by it. Jake attended the signing ceremony. He stood in the back of the room watching as Zethara and Zal-9 placed their marks on the treaty document. It was a moment that historians would study for centuries. The end of the longest war in galactic history ended not through conquest but through choice. After the ceremony, both Zethara and Zal-9 came to find Jake. Zethara's colors were the brightest gold he had ever seen from her. "Thank you, Jake Murphy. You gave us something we had forgotten we could have. You gave us hope." "The collective agrees," Zal-9 said. "Your contribution to galactic stability is acknowledged and appreciated. Humanity has proven itself valuable to the galactic community." Jake smiled.